Okay, now welcome. Spinal workshop on Tuesday nights at Monarch Family Chiropractic. I'm Dr. Kristen Zawada. Thank you for joining us. We're going to jump right into talking about the spinal hygiene movements for our low back mostly, and how it's wrapped into our core and how essential that is for a strong back, and talk about the foundation of that. Then we're going to go through a couple movements that are really safe movements to do for the low back. We didn't get too in depth in these in this workshop because that's easier to do when we're showing exercises or videotaping them being shown. So there's other workshops we've done those in, and sometimes it's easier to send you a modified version of an activity or a stretch or a low back exercise, or movement. So we'll go through some here in a minute, but as we get started, I want to talk about the components of posture, right? Something we talk about all the time in here, and it is the key and window to our spine, which is really truly what's going to affect our posture. If we, our low backs and our spines just in general, if we don't have the head over our shoulders over our hips and our low back then right over our knees and then our ankles, then we are setting ourselves up to have back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, because of where our body distributes our weight. And so in that, I want us to talk about how, give me one second, important the posture is and how that leads to a healthy or a low back. Hopefully in some of these postures, you're seeing where people have the dots drawn all the way up into the shoulders. We don't really have the dots drawn at the ears, but you all know from looking at your posture pictures that our ears should not be in front of our shoulders like that, right? So in looking at some of those pictures, as far as those first three especially, where are those heads in front of the shoulders? How about postures that look, in a sense, almost reversed, right? Like we're walking with our hips in front of us instead of under us. And that is a posture that creates a lot of low back compression and pain, because it's putting us into what we call an anterior tilt, right? Or really kind of a posterior, but an anterior tilt where you're really tipping forward and sticking your butt outwards. This is more of a posterior tilt in a sense where you're not feeling like the back of your tailbone, you're feeling the back of your low back be further backwards than your tailbone, where your tailbone's almost tucked under. But this creates a lot of compression into the low back and can be a reason that we need to strengthen our low back. Is that if that posture feels natural, there are muscles in our core and in our low back that aren't firing properly, some that are overfiring and some that are underfiring or maybe not really firing at all, that they're either fatigued or weakened from misuse or poor use, or a lot of repetitive motion, like sitting. So this tends to be a posture we find when there's a weakness in using our core, versus the opposite when things are tight in our core and we're tipped in a forward motion. Again, these are more of those reverse motions where our hips are well in front of our shoulders, which is not what we're after, right? And when we know that posture leads to how things look on the inside with those curves, the healthy curves we should have, then the low back has that same healthy curve as what the neck has, right? So any motion in the curve of that C shape when we're looking at the side view of us, right? So if I was turned this way, that natural curve in my neck would be the same as we would expect to see in the low back, right? It's that same angle. Now, when that happens to fall forward for too long, we see people in that reversed posture, right? What looks healthier, the one on the left or the one on the right? Yeah, the one on the right. The ears are over the shoulders or over the hips or over the knees or over the ankles, right? Versus that rounded posture where we start to curve in the upper back and therefore really overuse our low back. So many, many, many times, and it just happened this morning with a new patient, that I would say I could almost say 80 to 90% of low back pain that people come in with initially doesn't have anything to do with their low back and the posture it's in. It's the stress that's been put upon it because of our neck and upper back curves not doing their job. And then gravity is doing its job and putting all of that compression and weight down into our low back. So by the time we see something in the low back degenerate, it's usually because it's had decades to do that from above it. So even looking at our kiddos, so important these days. And we want to stop and take a minute to just talk about that, because posture starts immediately, right? And starts when we develop some of those curves in our spine, and when kids are doing tummy time and crawling and scooting and all that stuff they have to do before they walk, helps develop that great posture for them to be upright humans and place that weight upon their spines and have had those times for the curves to develop and get stable and support themselves as they start developing some muscle tone and then starting to hold themselves up and walk like you and I. Why it is ultra important now more than ever is that kids at a couple years old are looking at devices. And so we're so portable these days, and we're entertaining someone and entertaining our kids often with portable devices when we're out and about, that they're already starting to go into forward postures that don't support them. And so we want to make sure that their curves and their angles are good so that they don't have low back problems when they're still developing. So what's a great movement and support for our posture and our low back? It is actually this very innate and just kind of intuitive squat that a kiddo does. And we see it a lot in different cultures outside of our own, that is how they sit, or that is how they take a break. It's not go grab a chair, it's come into a squat position. So this is a very healthy posture for our low back and spine. And it's a better way to do an activity towards the ground than it is for us to bend over and create this lever system, if you will, like into our low back by bending forward, standing up and reaching for the floor, right? That is where a lot of low back things happen, as someone barely reaches forward or bends forward, but doesn't bend at the knees and bends at their hips. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't know what I did, but I can't straighten up. That's a lot of using wrong muscles in our low back to create postural movements that don't serve the way our body's designed to move and be supportive, right? So when we think about ergonomics and low back and being strong, we think about how we carry things. We want to hold things close to our body. We want to allow our knees to bend and our core to be strong. And we're going to talk about some of those core muscles here in a second. Which then allow us to engage that center and support our low back. Really, we're not really using our low back as much as we may think we are when the right core and postural muscles around our hip and low back are engaging and are activated. So I think something went wrong here, right? I mean, we look at the posture where we were in an upright position, and what we tend to see now more, because we all sit at computers or devices, and not as always ones that are so ergonomic, right? They may be like laptops and phones and things that are portable, aren't where we've got our monitor right at our eye height, right? We have it down low or in our laps. And so we have to really look at what we're doing to create that posture. So are we living our best posture, which is living our best life? These are the things that are affected by it. So one thing we do before we get into where what these muscles are and where they're at is looking at where what posture gives us and how that supports our low back and our core and the strength. One exercise we've done in the past in a couple different workshops that we'll do right now is, wherever you are out in Zoom land or here in the office with us, I want us to all sit up straight in our chair, find the back of our chair, take our legs and uncross them if they're crossed, and put our feet on the floor, and let whatever's if we have anything in our hands, just set it down and let our shoulders come back to the chair, and let our head just sit over our shoulders. And do whatever you want with your arms. If it's on your lap, if it's on the armrest, if it's just dangling at your side, but really that you're just focused on being supported in the chair. What I want you to do is take a breath from right here. And so from your core, from your belly button, I want you to take a deep breath in, fill up your belly, fill up your lungs, fill up your chest, fill up almost the air up into your neck, into your top of your shoulders, right? Almost like you're getting it all the way up into the top of your frame, and then let it out. That is when you are getting the most oxygen supply into your body. And it's by having the best low back and shoulder posture you can. There's a lot of things that it shows us, but it's energy and vitality, the most out of those. When we have poor posture, and when we have that rounding into our low back, or that rounding into our forward back. So when people slouch into a chair, so now I want you to drop into the chair and slouch, just as slouchy as you can be, right? Just slouch it back, kick feet up, cross ankles. Yeah. Now I want you to take that same breath and try to fill the belly, try to get it up into your lungs and up into the shoulders and head, right? It's very hard. You're getting about 30% less oxygen into your body and your lungs and your muscles and all your tissue. It's the same when we're slouched forward. So now what I want you to do is you can sit back up, but I want you to just drop into, like, I'm reading my phone on my lap, or I've got a good book and I've got it sitting down in my lap instead of right here in front of my face. And take that same kind of breath when you're looking down at your belly. Yeah. It's hard to do. It's much less oxygen than even 30% getting into more than that, less when you're in that more forward slouched position, right? You're just cutting off that ability for the lungs to open up. So we talk about all those things because it really comes back to where our back and our posture and our core come from. So we use this a lot, and hopefully you can see parts of this at the top and the bottom. But when we're looking at how we're defining the low back and looking at what makes it strong and what supports it, it is not our sedentary lifestyle. It's the reason we have to do posture exercises and movements and work on our low back, is because the sitting is the new smoking, right? It is not the posture that supports good breath, good circulation, or good digestion. I mean, think about how your stomach felt too when you're just like hunched over yourself, right? Doesn't feel great. It's not allowing for things to even have the movement that they need there. So put my eyeballs on for a second. And we're going to look at how it reads about that crisscross syndrome. So I'm going to, instead of creating a different slide, I thought we're going to use a worksheet that we use all the time in here. And because of the sedentary lifestyle, that's when we see posture worsen, and it starts earlier and earlier, like we talked about. When we talk about a lower crossed syndrome, that's what it's talking about at the bottom. So things from about the mid-rib cage down. And so I'm going to kind of read a little bit to you here of what it says. So you're going to miss my face for a second. But when we're talking about a lower cross syndrome, we're talking about weak abdominals and then basically a weaker gluteus, right? So when you think about the three muscles that make up your butt muscles, that is that area that's kind of at the back of the butt and into the side of it, right? And so those go together. So we have to think about our core, and that our abdominals play a part in the strength of our back, because so do the glutes, and the glutes can be weak if the stomach is weak. And then what gets tight are its counterparts. So that would be what we see in the erectors or the thoracolumbar. So the back side of us, think about those muscles that run along your spine on the left and right side from about the bottom of your rib cage down to your hips. Those get really overly active and tight, right? Those are the ones that feel almost like ropes or beef jerky sometimes to us, right? Because they're over engaging, doing all the work for our low back. And then what also gets tight, and this is the sitting syndrome, is our hip flexors, which is what you hear us talk about all the time, those psoas muscles in the front of your hip. And so those show that are kind of showing that crisscross pattern in the very front. So they're talking about the rectus femoris, and yes, those are some of the like ab muscles, but it's more the deeper layer of muscles that move the hip. And I'm going to show you, hopefully it's going to give us a good diagram. So when we think about this, they're showing this from the side. So you could see, like, you know, the front of, let's see if I can make my mouse move, the front of the pelvis here, that hip flexor. So we'll look at another picture in a minute. And then the back muscles here, and those two going together in this crisscross way from back to front. And then from front to back, it's weaker abdominals, and the ones lower in your belly, below your belly button, not the ones that we think of like in movies of six packs. Those do nothing in big relation to your low back. It's the ones that are underneath all that that matter. They're deeper into your core and your pelvis. And then those fighting with the glutes in the back, so the butt muscles. Okay, so when you think about this, think about an X, think about this crisscross pattern. So our front left is working with our back right, and our front right is working with our back left. So think about an X straight through your body, straight through your hips and your low back. Okay, so now let's see if we can go into showing you some of these. So when you hear us and we do some of these stretches with you, and we're working your psoas when we're putting some pressure points along the inside of the front of your hips. That is to take pressure off your low back, because this muscle is two muscles. They run together. They're big, they're long, and we can only reach a small portion of them. So that far left picture is when you remove all the stomach and all those things out of the way. There's muscles that come across the front, and this is a partially, it's a different muscle here, but it's a good diagram of showing where, in a similar fashion, it's not quite this one on the left, but when the muscles are attaching to the psoas, kind of comes right in this inner brim of the pelvis, right across here. So right here and right here. And then, just like this muscle does, an upside down V comes in and attaches on L5, L4, L3, L2, L1. So all the way through your low back, those muscles attach on the belly side of your spine, not the back side, but the belly side, and they tighten and pull you forward. These are the ones that are engaged when you are sitting all the time. So when you go to stand up and it's hard to stand up, you'll feel it in the back, in the low back. It is not the low back's muscles. It's not the low back's fault or problem. It is these ones in the front that are pulling you forward, making you kind of stand like you're sticking your butt out, right? It's the hips are forward and the tailbone's pointing back. Almost like you're waddling. That is a component of the hip flexors being too tight, and they are a core muscle really that control and move and limit our low back movements. These muscles here are on the back side of the hip. So now this middle picture is like you're looking at the back side of somebody, and that's the left hip, right? And the right hip, and the spine and the tailbone. So these are the muscles attached underneath the right side. And those glutes that we just talked about are the ones that are engaging your low back based on being attached to the back of your hip and close to your low back. And the ones that come all around attaching through that back side of the pelvic brim and front side. This far right one is really showing intermuscles on the core of our pelvis. So these ones are really deep underneath fascia inside our internal, like almost thinking about this internal space here between our hips, our pelvis, and our backside tailbone. So everything in between there that supports things like our low back, our bladder, our bowel functions, all of that, the movements of our hips and legs as they come across the front of the hip bones right here, right? So there is a bazillion, right? No, there's not that many. There is a good handful, a dozen or more, deep, that was really exaggeration, wasn't that? Deep in the pelvic core that really change how our low back functions. So this is deeper into the pelvis, but I wanted you to just see the amount of layers that are there that we don't even know and don't even really think about. So when we look at that, we're really trying to engage the right ones and loosen the others from overfiring. And so we talk about some of the movements and some of the rules to the movements, right? So when we talk about movement, always some people tend to ask, well, what movement? And as Zach always says, just the next movement is the right one, right? We just want to keep moving. And so when we're doing different postural movements that affect our core and affect our low back, we're listening, we're focusing on the movement we're doing in really a clear way and being very aware of where we are in space. We were talking about this earlier in the day, a couple of us, and the kiddos in the practice, that there are movements we're doing that I'd rather you do 5 to 7 good ones, like your wall angels or your wobbles, or some of those core movements that we'll talk about here in a minute, then you do 10 or 15 of them and then be improper or then be falling out of that awareness of where you are in space, because we want to create a healthy pattern. And if the body and the brain is doing it the old way or the way that's counterproductive to the right supportive movement, then we're just going to over-engage the wrong things, right? And we're going to continue to have the low back discomfort that we have. So we always want that breath to come from the belly, like we were just practicing, and that we're doing a daily activity. So really the goal is that you're doing this about 3 times a day. Sometimes we have people, we say 3 to 5, because if you could do it start of your day, lunchtime, maybe a midday, dinner time, and bedtime, that would be ideal. And again, it's if we're doing 30 seconds to a minute of something, it's not taking up a bunch of time. It's just getting the consistency in. And the postural interruptions ones that we do, like wall angels and wobbles, those are ones that are great to do in an interval time of, if you sit for an hour, you should be setting a timer and getting off of that low back and tailbone and doing some movements, standing up and moving, as well as some of the ones when you have to sit in the chair that are like the wobble movements. So let's show a couple of what those are, if those of you that don't know. And this one goes a little more advanced. That's not necessarily where I meant to start, but it's just the rotation of where we put these in. So this is a good foundational movement when you're at a stage of no pain and we are through the mobility component, and now you have motion and we're trying to work on supporting the low back motion. So some people may have doing something similar to this called Mackenzie's. This is where we're trying to strengthen stretch that front of the pelvis, the front of the hip, so that we're not having that pulling factor on the low back, on the backside. So where the legs would be on the ground and the arms would be on the ground as well, but pushing ourselves up more into like a cobra position. But this Superman extension is one that's working on stretching the front, but engaging the back in the right way. So we're engaging the glute as we're stretching the front side. So the arms are relaxed, the face is relaxed, the arms, the shoulders and head are relaxed. It's just a motion that is actually extending the muscles of the low back, the glutes, so tightening up the bum, and the hamstrings, the back of the leg. And as you point the toes and lift the legs, you will get that activation in the back of the legs. It's holding for 5 to 10 seconds and then coming down. So that's a good motion for getting the right movement in the low back, right? Following that proper curve. Rather than tipping forward and putting stress upon that low back. So it's more motions that are going to be on all fours or in a motion of extension like this. This would be how to mimic something that you're doing like a wobble, where you're taking the wobble cushion. And if you're in the office and we have the wobbles here, you can sit on the wobbles and you're doing this type of motion. But you could do this seated in a pelvic tilt, even if you didn't have a cushion, right? So if you can envision how the arrows are going, and again, if you want to practice this, those of us in office or even just at home, is let's talk through it. What does it feel like to sit upright in the chair, put feet on the floor, have the feet almost kind of underneath you? So this is where you're not sitting against the back of the chair. You're up a little bit in the chair to where your feet or your heels are almost underneath your tush. Okay. And you're going to tuck that tailbone under, and it's going to rock your tailbone or your pelvis forward. It's going to think about like tucking your belly button into your spine, right? You're drawing your abdominals in towards the front of your spine. And then as your low back, you're going to round. So you're going to go that opposite direction. You're going to extend your pelvis in the opposite way. You're going to take your tailbone back. You're going to stick your chest out. So you're rounding that low back, and you're going to go slow. If you feel something in your low back or hips or tailbone, then you just don't go that far. You just go in small increments backwards, tucking the belly button in, and small increments forward, where you're jutting the belly out, chest out, taking your tailbone back, right? The abdominals are relaxing here. This is when you're taking your deep breath. So the breath work comes in with everything, as you know, when we talk about. So breath in as you push the belly forward and the tailbone back. And then as you breathe out, you're tucking in, engaging that core, engaging the belly, engaging that lower pelvis, and bringing your belly button into your spine. So those are ones you can do again in that rotation. You can also do the side to side. This is a little harder to show or to explain. I like doing it more on the wobbles where we're not necessarily twisting, but we are tilting, right? So we're tilting left and we're tilting right. So if I'm tilting my hips to the left, dipping my shoulders down to the left and stretching that right side of my rib cage, right? If I'm leaning in this way to my right, then I'm stretching right, and my left hip and side are opening up across the low back and side, right? All those connectors that are on the side of our body into that abdominals and those obliques, right? So those are good motions to do front, back, and side to side. And why do we wobble? Why do we do all these pelvic tilts? Why is that such a key movement for a strong back and a healthy back? It's because you're engaging the small muscles in your core and in your hips, and you're also hydrating the discs or the joints and getting motion and hydration with that disc space. So you have that cushion between each vertebra, each spinal bone, and those are like our shock absorption. And during the day sitting and standing, they get compressed and they get less hydrated and they get a little dehydrated and they get thinner. When we sleep at night, they plump back up and they get hydrated. So a movement to keep that hydration in the low back and those joints moving the way they're supposed to, and to keep fluid moving in them from it sitting stagnant, is for you to do a motion like this, is to get into a chair or sit on the wobble cushions and tilt right, tilt left, and then tilt front and tilt back. Okay, that's going to help hydrate the discs and hydrate the joints and keep them lubricated. And that gets good fluid moving in and gets that stagnant fluid moving out. So it's a really healthy motion and very simple motion to start with low back, whether you're 5, 15, 85. That's a good motion to do. And then falling into things that open that up. Child's pose is a great one for stretching the low back and muscles along the spine that are really hard to get to unless someone's massaging you or using something to kind of activate those. Those are hard to stretch yourself or to massage yourself. We're not going to go into some of the other motions below that, but a glute squeeze is thinking about how we want to engage our glutes and our core to support us, not overuse those low back muscles, right? So with our core, it's things like a Kegel, things like bridges, things like dead bugs. So I'm going to throw out some names there. And if you don't know what those are, we haven't shown them to you yet, or it's not one you've done before, I want you to look those up. And then we can talk about that and send you some videos correlated to them that have been in other workshops. But things like dead bug, wobbles, and bridging are all ones that are going to support and Kegels, activating the front core posture muscles, so that we're not overusing those front hip muscles and we're not overusing the glutes, or we're using the glutes properly and we're not overusing the low back muscles, right, along our spine. This is the last one I think we'll show you tonight, and it's called the spinal toothbrush. And I don't have a picture of this, but if you read through, I think we can do it together. Stand with your back against the wall. So I'm going to just talk loud enough. You've got me on your computer. Get up out of your chair and go find a wall. And we're going to stand up against it. And you're going to put your heels against the wall, your gluteals, which are those butt muscles. Okay. The back of your shoulders, and just the back of your head. All of it should be touching the wall. So if you can find an empty space, everybody. We'll go along there with Jesse, Kathy. Yeah. Awesome. We're all participating over here. So standing with back and swap. Okay, I want you to pull your shoulders back and down. Just as your chest lifts, imagine you've got a string pulling your sternum up to the sky. But your head is gonna draw back. Your head's up, but it's kind of coming back to the wall. And you're gonna slightly tuck your pelvis, your hips, under to engage your ab muscles. So I want to make sure that you're not arching your back, touching the back of your butt to the wall. I want you to kind of soften your knees, take that belly button and tuck it in, right? So that you're actually touching the top of your low back and gluteals, glute muscles to the wall, not the very back of, lower part of your tush, right? So I want soft knees. Yep. Okay. Tuck belly button in. Watching everybody here, right? Like belly button in. So no tucking, no arching and dropping the belly forward. We're going to tuck the belly button in. Now those shoulders should be relaxing at the wall, and so should the head. So there's no big motion of anybody's overworking at the shoulders and head. You're engaging your abdominal muscles. So I want you to think about like a Kegel. Think about squeezing your lower abs, everything underneath your belly button. And you're going to take a nice breath in. But your face is relaxed, your arms are back, your shoulders are relaxed. So we are belly breathing. We are not breathing with our shoulders and our chest. So we are not engaging up here. We're deep breathing from our belly. All right. I'll try to kind of show you what I'm doing as they're doing it. So breath from here, not from here, right? Heads against the wall and relaxed. And you think about as you're breathing in, like someone's pulling a string straight through you, all the way up the top of your head. Right? But you've still got your core engaged. As you take that tall breath and extend up, you're not disengaging your belly, you're engaging your core while you're just letting your shoulders and chest open up. Does that make sense when we're doing that? So with that, yeah, it can be hard because what we do is breath from here, or we breathe and we go, and we stick our chest out, And that's not necessarily good posture, right? That's doing a lot of counterintuitive things we just talked about, but all of that is supporting your core and your low back if you start from the belly. And if you start from that softened knee, engaged abdomen, tucking your belly button into your spine, and then you're using more of your glute muscles and your ab muscles, not your low back and the front of those hips, right? Or your shoulders for that matter. But this is a really good one to practice how you engage all those things together for a stronger back and a more properly engaged core so that you don't have back problems. So we're going to end with some things about why bad posture is common. Low back pain is common. It's not normal, right? So if we have a vibrant, flexible, mobile structure, your spine, your body, your posture, they're all vital components to health, to aging, to being vital, to living life, right? The way we want to. And low back can be really a limiting thing for a lot of people. A lot of people come in with it and it's really how are we using the rest of our frame and what muscles are we engaging and which ones are we not even sure we even know what they are and how to make them work. So I want you to think about that. It's not normal to have bad posture. It's not normal to have low back pain, but it's really common to see because of all those postural pictures you saw and all the things in our world that we just do that's part of our society. So I want you to think about now's the time. If it's not been addressed, no better time than now. And come in and get checked. If you're somebody joining us and this is new to you, or engage us in what's a motion or what's something, a muscle group, or what's one of these movements that you've not done before that you want to go over with us, or that you want us to send you in more detail, some of the other actual videos we have of how to do some of these. If you feel like this is all some new material of how to support your core and your low back. Because ultimately all these movements through our frame is what's going to keep the low back from being a big culprit of what seems like the problem. And it just ends up being sometimes the result of poor moving structure up above or below. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for getting up and playing along. Hopefully you got something out of just how breath is important, how sitting in our chairs are important, how often we should have a postural interruption exercise for supporting our low back, and a couple tips on some very simple things to do to engage your low back that you don't need equipment for. You don't need to go to the gym. It's things you just set your alarm for every 20 minutes to an hour so that at least hourly you are doing a couple minutes of one of these exercises, especially if you sit in a chair for your day. Students alike, this is not just everybody at their computers that are adults in the corporate world. This is even our kiddos who are now going back to school this week and next week and going to sit in their chairs a lot where they weren't all summer. So these are great ones to incorporate with your kiddos. So we look forward to your takeaways and which thing you're going to try. We will see you in the office to learn what that next additional exercise or postural movement is going to be for you. And we will help with any other ones that you feel like you want some help with. So signing off for now. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And come the following Tuesday, starting the 26th, just a quick announcement that as you all are learning, and those who haven't learned yet, if you haven't been in the office this week and last, as our hours are extending and changing. So they'll be a little more family friendly. We are going to be opening up earlier at 8 o'clock. We will be adjusting and through 11:45. We will close from noon to 1 for lunch, and then we'll be opening up earlier to do some adjusting over that lunch hour early afternoon from 1 to 2. And then we'll be having a specialty hour for our new patients in the afternoon that the office will be closed for adjustments from 2 to 3:30. And then we'll be opening back up from 3:30 to 4:45 for all those afternoon people to get adjusted. So we have the hours listed here. We have them posted all over, but it's all for us to help engage, giving you more adjusting hours and time to get in, and times that are a little more available that are family friendly and being able to be available before work and a little bit more at the lunch hour. Since there's a lot of people who live and work right around here. So if that's new to you, call in the office or check in with where your appointments are. We'll be sliding some people around, but hopefully accommodating more again, time for people to get in that isn't in the late rush hour drive, to not be trying to do that commute to get in here at the very, very end of the day. So send in who you know. We're looking forward to connecting with our community and you sharing this with them. And we will see you next week. Come the 26th week, when we start our new hours, the workshops will go to recordings, and for the time being, will be sent to you in the recording version. So they won't be live in the evenings anymore, but you will have them by that Wednesday. So by the midweek, we will have them posted on the YouTube channel, and you'll receive the link to watch the ones that you have signed up to engage in with us and in the community. So you'll see things as we get closer, but starting the week of the 26th, you'll start getting your recordings sent to you via email or text in the middle of the week to join us that way and engage with us that way. And then we'll look forward to hearing your takeaways more in the office. So thanks for your engagement tonight, and we will see you soon.